After 30 years of marriage, Thomas walked away without a backward glance. He left me for Rebecca, his assistant 15 years his junior, claiming they had a deeper connection. When our daughter Sophia told me she was too busy to visit, on my birthday, I understood, until I saw her tagged in photos at a lavish party, toasting Rebecca while Thomas looked on proudly. My daughter called this woman Mom. My 65th birthday arrived on a perfect spring day. I had been looking forward to it for weeks, not because I particularly enjoyed getting older, but because Sophia had promised to visit. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It had been nearly 6 months since I'd seen my only child in person. Video calls were nice, but they couldn't replace the warmth of a real hug or the comfort of sharing a meal together. I woke early that morning, feeling surprisingly energetic. The small cottage I'd moved into after the divorce felt cozy and bright as sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows. I hummed to myself as I prepared a special breakfast. Thomas had always been the cook in our family, but I'd taught myself, over the past 5 years, small victories. My phone buzzed just as I was pouring my coffee. Sophia's face lit up my screen, and I answered with a smile. "Happy birthday, Mom!" Her voice sounded rushed, traffic noise in the background. "I'm on my way to work." "Thank you, sweetheart," I replied, trying to hide my excitement about seeing her later. "What time should I expect you? I thought I'd make that pasta dish you like." There was a pause, then a sigh. "That's actually why I'm calling. I'm so sorry, Mom, but I can't make it today." My hand froze around my coffee mug. "Oh?" "This huge project just got moved up at work. My boss is breathing down my neck, and I'll be at the office until midnight if I'm lucky." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You know I wouldn't miss your birthday, if it wasn't important. We'll celebrate this weekend instead, I promise." I swallowed my disappointment. At 65, I'd learned that expectations often led to heartbreak. "Of course I understand. Your career is important. Thanks for understanding. The best mom ever, as always." She made a kissing sound. "Gotta run into this meeting. Love you." "Love you too," I said, but she had already hung up. The kitchen felt suddenly quiet. I looked at the breakfast I'd prepared, enough for 2, and slowly sat down at the table alone. This wasn't how I'd imagined starting my birthday. Still, I reminded myself that Sophia had a demanding job at her marketing firm. She worked hard, and I was proud of her success. I spent the morning puttering around the cottage, reading a bit, then decided to treat myself to lunch at the small cafe down the street. The owner, Maria, greeted me with a warm smile and a complimentary slice of cake when I told her it was my birthday. "No one should be alone on their birthday," she said, squeezing my shoulder. "I'm not alone," I replied automatically. "I'm having lunch with you." She laughed and left me to my meal, but her words echoed in my mind. No one should be alone on their birthday. Was that true? After 30 years of marriage, 5 years of divorce, and decades of motherhood, was it so terrible to spend one birthday by myself? Back home, I decided to distract myself by checking social media. Sophia was always encouraging me to be more active online. "It's a way to stay connected, Mom," she'd insist. I'd created accounts mostly to see photos of her life, the parts she didn't always share during our brief calls. I scrolled mindlessly through my feed until a notification appeared. Sophia had been tagged in new photos. My finger moved automatically to open them. The first image showed a lavishly decorated room in what appeared to be an upscale restaurant. Crystal chandeliers hung from high ceilings, and elaborate flower arrangements adorned every table. I recognized it immediately as Le Jardin, the most expensive restaurant in the city, a place Thomas and I had visited only on our major anniversaries, when we'd splurged despite the cost. In the center of the image stood Sophia, dressed not in work clothes, but in an elegant blue dress I'd never seen before. Her hair was styled perfectly, her makeup flawless. She was raising a champagne glass, smiling broadly at something out of frame. I swiped to the next photo and felt my heart stutter. There was Thomas, my ex-husband, looking distinguished with his salt and pepper hair and that familiar half-smile I had once loved. His arm was wrapped around Rebecca, who looked radiant in a red dress that highlighted her still youthful figure. She was laughing, her head thrown back, surrounded by people who were all focused on her with adoring expressions. And there, beside them, was Sophia, leaning in to embrace Rebecca with genuine affection. The caption read, "Happy 50th birthday to the most amazing woman. Blessed #family celebration." My hands began to shake. 50? Rebecca was celebrating her 50th birthday today, the same day as mine. And my daughter, who was too busy with work to visit her mother, had made time to attend this elaborate celebration for the woman who had replaced me. I swiped through more photos, each one driving the knife deeper. There was Sophia helping Rebecca open an expensive-looking gift. There was Thomas raising a toast, his face proud and content in a way I hadn't seen in the final. Years of our marriage, and then I saw it. The comment Sophia had left beneath the original post. "So blessed to celebrate with you, Mom. Love you to the moon and back, Mom." My daughter was calling this woman, this replacement, this usurper, Mom. The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the coffee table. I felt as though all the air had been sucked from the room. 15. Years ago, when Sophia had graduated from college, she had looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Everything I am, I owe to you, Mom." Now she was bestowing that sacred title on someone else. I picked up my phone again, my vision blurring with unshed tears. There were more photos. Rebecca blowing out candles on an elaborate cake. Thomas's children from his first marriage. Children he'd barely spoken to during our marriage, laughing with Sophia as if they were all lifelong friends. Rebecca's parents, whom I'd never met during the 3 years she'd been Thomas's assistant, beaming proudly at their daughter. They looked like a perfect family, a complete family, a family that had no space, no need for me. I set the phone down again and walked to the window, staring out at the small garden I'd planted last spring. The irises were blooming, had been blooming for days. But I'd been too, preoccupied with anticipation of Sophia's visit to truly notice them. A memory surfaced. Sophia at 7 years old, helping me plant irises in our old garden. "These are special flowers, Mom," she'd said seriously. "Dad says they're named after the goddess of rainbows." Thomas had always known such things. Little facts that made the world seem more magical. It was one of the things I'd loved about him. One of the many things Rebecca now enjoyed instead. My reflection stared back at me from the window, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that had seen too much disappointment. Behind that reflection, the irises continued their silent blooming, indifferent to human heartbreak. I took a deep breath, then another. The pain was sharp but familiar, a variation of what I'd felt when Thomas first told me he was leaving. Back then, I'd thought nothing could hurt worse than losing my husband. Of 3 decades, I'd been wrong. This betrayal cut deeper because it came from the one person I thought would never desert me, my daughter. I returned to the couch and picked up my phone once more. My finger hovered over the call button next to Sophia's name. What would I say? How could I confront her without sounding like a bitter, jealous old woman? Would she even answer? Or would she send me to voicemail while continuing to celebrate with her new mom? The questions swirled as tears finally spilled down my cheeks. On my 65th birthday, I had received an unwanted gift, the truth about my place in my daughter's life. And for the first time since Thomas left, I felt truly, devastatingly alone. Thomas and I met in our final year of college. I was studying literature, dreaming of becoming a professor someday. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He was an architecture student with ambitious plans to design buildings that would transform city skylines. We were introduced at a friend's party. I spilled wine on his sketches, and he laughed instead of getting angry. By the end of the night, we were sitting on the building's rooftop, talking about books, buildings, and the future we might share. We married 2 years later in a small ceremony. Neither of us had much money, but we were rich in dreams and determination. Our first apartment was tiny, a one-bedroom walk-up with unreliable heat and neighbors who argued loudly at all hours. Thomas converted a closet into a drafting space. I graded student papers at our kitchen table. We were happy, genuinely happy, in a way that seemed both ordinary and miraculous. Sophia came along 3 years into our marriage. Pregnancy had been difficult, 3 miscarriages before her, and when the doctor placed her in my arms, red-faced and screaming with healthy lungs, I felt as though the universe had finally granted my deepest wish. Thomas cried when he held her, his large hands cradling her tiny body with such tenderness that my heart nearly burst with love for them both. "She's perfect," he whispered. Our little miracle. As Sophia grew, our lives expanded around her. Thomas's career took off. His innovative designs caught the attention of a prestigious firm, and promotions followed. I put my doctoral studies on hold, teaching part-time at the community college while raising our daughter. It wasn't the career I'd imagined, but watching Sophia discover the world brought a different kind of fulfillment. Our modest apartment became a starter home in the suburbs, which eventually gave way to the house, a beautiful colonial with a wraparound porch and the garden where Sophia and I planted those irises. Thomas designed a custom addition, a sunroom where light poured in even on cloudy days. That room became my haven, filled with books and comfortable chairs, the place where Sophia and I read together every night before her bedtime. "This is what happiness looks like," Thomas said one evening, finding us asleep amid a pile of picture books. He snapped a photo that sat on his desk for years afterward. Time passed in the pleasant rhythm of a secure family life, school plays, and soccer practices. Summer vacations at the lake house Thomas's firm maintained for employees. Holiday traditions that became more elaborate as our financial situation improved. We weren't perfect. Thomas worked too much. I sometimes resented the career I'd set aside. We argued about mundane things. But we were stable. A unit. A family bound by shared history and mutual respect. When Sophia left for college, the house felt suddenly too large. Thomas and I circled each other like cautious strangers, relearning how to be a couple rather than parents. There were awkward silences where family noise had once filled the gaps. We made efforts, date nights, weekend trips, new hobbies. But something had shifted between us, subtle but undeniable. "We need to rediscover each other," I suggested one night over dinner. Thomas nodded, but his eyes drifted to his phone, checking work emails. "Absolutely," he said absently. "Maybe next month when this project wraps up." Next month became next season, then next year. Sophia graduated with honors, landed a job at a marketing firm in the city, and began building her independent life. She called regularly, came home for holidays, and sent thoughtful gifts. I was proud of the woman she'd become, confident, compassionate, with Thomas's creativity and my pragmatism in equal measure. For our 30th anniversary, Thomas surprised me with dinner at Le Jardin. He seemed distracted throughout the meal, checking his watch, offering polite but minimal responses to my attempts at conversation. I attributed it to work stress. His firm was competing for a major international contract, and the pressure was intense. "Is everything okay?" I asked as we waited for dessert. He reached across the table and took my hand. "We should talk when we get home." Those words, "we should talk," carried a weight that made my stomach clench. At home, in the sunroom that had witnessed so many happy moments, Thomas told me about Rebecca. She'd started as his assistant 2 years earlier. The connection had been immediate, he said, though he'd resisted it at first out of respect for our marriage. "I didn't plan for this to happen," he said, his voice steady despite the bomb he was dropping. "But I can't ignore how I feel anymore." "How you feel?" I repeated, the words tasting bitter. "What about 30 years, Thomas? What about the life we've built?" He looked around the sunroom, his gaze lingering on the family photos that lined the bookshelves. "I'll always be grateful for our years together for Sophia, but people change, Elaine. We're not the same people who met at that party all those years ago. So you throw everything away? Just like that?" He sighed, suddenly looking older than his 57 years. "It's not just like that. I've been unhappy for a long time. We both have, if we're honest with ourselves. I wanted to argue, to defend the comfortable life we'd created, but the words wouldn't come. There had been signs, the growing silences, the separate vacations, the perfunctory kisses. Still, I had believed we would weather this phase as we had weathered others. I had believed in the resilience of 30 years. I was wrong. The divorce was surprisingly civilized. Thomas was generous with the settlement, the cottage, a substantial alimony, half of our retirement savings. Sophia shuttled between us during those first difficult months, trying to maintain relationships with both parents without taking sides. "Are you okay, Mom?" she asked repeatedly, her young face creased with worry that no 24-year-old should have to feel. "I'm adjusting," I would answer, forcing a smile. "Don't worry about me. I'm tougher than I look." I threw myself into creating a new life. The cottage needed renovations. I learned basic carpentry, painting, gardening. I joined a book club, took cooking classes, volunteered at the local library. On the surface, I was adapting well to single life after 3 decades of marriage. But nights were difficult. I would wake at 3 a.m., reaching instinctively for Thomas's warmth before remembering he was gone. The silence of the cottage would press against me then, heavy and accusing. In those dark hours, I wondered what I could have done differently. Should I have been more attentive, more passionate, less predictable? When Thomas and Rebecca married 18 months after our divorce, Sophia called to warn me before I saw it on social media. "Are you sure you're okay with this, Mom?" she asked carefully. "Your father has the right to find happiness," I replied, the words practiced and hollow. "And so do I." But as I hung up the phone, I wasn't sure I believed in that possibility anymore. Happiness seemed like a country I had been exiled from, a place whose language I was rapidly forgetting. Until my 65th birthday, I had thought Sophia was the one constant in my shifting world. The one person who would never leave, never betray, never forget. I had thought wrong. From the moment Sophia was born, we shared a bond that seemed unbreakable. Thomas was a good father, attentive when he was home, but his career often took him away. During those absences, Sophia and I formed our own little world. I was the one who soothed her nightmares, bandaged skinned knees, and celebrated small victories. "It's just us girls tonight," I would say when Thomas traveled for work. Sophia would grin conspiratorially, and we'd build blanket forts in the living room or bake cookies at midnight. These rituals became our secret language, a shorthand for the special connection we shared. When Sophia was 7, she went through a phase of intense separation anxiety after Thomas missed her school play for a business trip. For weeks afterward, she would burst into tears whenever either of us left the house. "What if you don't come back?" she asked one morning, her small hands clutching my skirt as I prepared to leave for work. I knelt to her level, meeting her worried eyes. "I will always come back to you, Sophia. Always. That's what mothers do." "Promise?" she whispered. "I promise. And when we're apart, you can hold on to this." I gave her a small stone I'd found at the lake house that summer, smooth and heart-shaped. When you miss me, just hold it tight. She carried that stone everywhere for months, eventually graduating to keeping it on her nightstand. Years later, when she left for college, I found it carefully placed on my pillow, a silent acknowledgement that our roles had reversed. Now I was the one being left. Through her teenage years, when many of her friends grew distant from their parents, Sophia remained remarkably open with me. We talked about everything: school pressure, friend drama, her first heartbreak when her high school boyfriend left for a different college. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" she asked once, after I'd comforted her through a particularly difficult night. "Because I know you," I replied simply. "I've known you since before you were born. That's a head start no one else gets." She laughed through her tears. "I'm so lucky you're my mom." Those words became a refrain between us, through her college years, her first job disappointments, her early adult struggles. When Thomas and I divorced, Sophia seemed determined to prove that our family rupture wouldn't change our relationship. "Dad made his choice," she said firmly during one of our weekend visits shortly after he moved out. "But you and me, Mom, we're solid. Always have been, always will be." I believed her. I needed to believe her. With Thomas gone, Sophia became my emotional anchor, the one constant in a life suddenly filled with change. We spoke several times a week, and despite her busy schedule, she made time for regular visits. She helped me move into the cottage, spending a long weekend painting walls and arranging furniture. She sent me funny text messages on difficult days, somehow knowing when I needed the boost. For my birthday the year after the divorce was finalized, Sophia took me to a spa retreat in the mountains. We spent 3 days hiking, getting massages, and talking late into the night. On the final evening, over glasses of wine beside a fireplace, she grew serious. "I need you to know something, Mom," she said, her eyes reflecting the dancing flames. "No matter what happens with Dad and her, you're my mother. No one can ever replace you." I felt tears threatening. "Thank you for saying that." She reached across and squeezed my hand. "I'm not just saying it. I mean it. Some of my friends barely talk to their moms, but I can't imagine that. You've always been there for me, through everything. I want to be there for you too." After that weekend, I stopped worrying about losing Sophia to Thomas's new life. We had our own relationship, independent of him, built on years of shared experiences and mutual respect. When she mentioned seeing her father and Rebecca occasionally, I made a point of responding neutrally, never putting her in the position of choosing sides. "It's healthy that you maintain a relationship with your father," I told her, swallowing my own complicated feelings. "I would never want you to give that up." She seemed grateful for my understanding, and it strengthened our connection further. We developed new traditions: Sunday morning video calls, monthly dinner dates at new restaurants, a joint subscription to a book service that sent us the same titles to discuss together. When Sophia started dating Michael, a colleague from her marketing firm, she brought him to the cottage before introducing him to Thomas and Rebecca. "I want him to meet my mom first," she explained. "You're the one whose opinion really matters to me." I loved her for that gesture, for the priority it signaled. Michael was kind and intelligent, clearly smitten with my daughter, and I gave my wholehearted approval. When they moved in together last year, I helped them organize their new apartment, offering furniture from storage and spending a weekend helping Sophia arrange her kitchen. "Just like yours, Mom." For my 64th birthday, Sophia and Michael surprised me with concert tickets to see my favorite jazz singer. We had dinner beforehand, and Sophia presented me with a photo album she'd created, documenting our relationship through the years. The final page held a handwritten note. "To the strongest woman I know who taught me everything important. Thank you for being my mom, my friend, and my role model. All my love, Sophia." I kept that album on my coffee table, often turning its pages when loneliness crept in. Each photo, Each memory captured reinforced my belief in the unshakable bond between us. Even when Sophia mentioned attending Thomas and Rebecca's Christmas gathering or joining them for Rebecca's birthday the previous year, I didn't worry. She always called me first on holidays, always made time for separate celebrations with me. She was an adult navigating relationships with divorced parents. I understood the balancing act required. "You're handling this all so maturely," I told her once. "I'm proud of you." She hugged me tightly. "I learned from the best. You never trash-talk Dad, even though you'd have every right to." "That wouldn't help anyone," I replied. "Especially not you." "See? Wisdom. That's why I need you in my life." That conversation had taken place just 2 months before my 65th birthday. 2 months before I discovered that the daughter who called me her role model, who claimed to need my wisdom, had been calling another woman Mom. 2 months before the foundation of trust we'd built over a lifetime cracked beneath my feet. As the evening of my birthday deepened into night, I sat in my cottage surrounded by evidence of our bond. Photos, gifts, the throw blanket Sophia had given me last Christmas, the mug she'd painted in elementary school that I still use daily. Each item now seemed to mock me, artifacts from a relationship I had fundamentally misunderstood. I picked up my phone again, staring at those damning photos. Had I imagined the closeness between us? Had Sophia been performing affection while secretly transferring her loyalty to Rebecca? Or had something changed recently, some influence I hadn't detected? I didn't know. For the first time in her life, I couldn't read my daughter at all. The person who had been my emotional touchstone, my reason for pushing forward after Thomas left, had become a stranger to me, and I had no idea what to do about it. I spent that night alternating between anger and disbelief. Sleep came in short. Restless bursts, interrupted by dreams where Sophia and Rebecca laughed together at my expense. By morning, I had resolved to confront my daughter directly. No accusations, just questions. I needed to understand. I poured myself a cup of coffee and rehearsed what I would say. Calm, reasonable, adult. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't shout. I would simply ask for the truth. My finger hovered over Sophia's contact information. Instead of calling, I decided to text. Less immediate, less emotional. "I'd like to talk when you have time today. It's important." 3 hours passed with no response. Not unusual for a workday, though the social media photos made it clear she had taken the day off for Rebecca's celebration. Around noon, my phone finally chimed. "Sorry, super busy. Everything okay?" The casualness of her response after what she'd done sparked a fresh wave of hurt. I took a deep breath before typing, "I saw the photos from Rebecca's birthday party, the one you said you couldn't attend mine for because of work." The 3 dots indicating she was typing appeared, disappeared, then reappeared several times. 5 minutes passed before her reply arrived. "Can we talk about this tonight? I'm in meetings all afternoon." More lies. Or was she actually working? Today, the day after the celebration, I didn't know what to believe anymore. "Of course," I responded. "Call me when you're free." I spent the afternoon in a fog, mechanically going through the motions of my day. I watered the garden, dusted bookshelves, prepared a simple dinner I had no appetite for. The cottage felt suffocating, so I took a long walk along the creek path, behind my neighborhood. The fresh air helped clear my head, but the fundamental questions remained unanswered. When had this shift happened? How long had Sophia been calling Rebecca Mom? Had there been signs I'd missed? Looking back, I could identify small moments that might have been clues. About a year ago, Sophia had mentioned attending a cooking class with Rebecca. "She makes this amazing paella," Sophia had said, her voice warm with admiration. She's teaching her technique. Thomas had never cooked paella in our home. This was something new, something that belonged exclusively to Rebecca and Sophia's relationship. At the time, I'd felt a twinge of discomfort but dismissed it as natural jealousy. After all, wasn't it good that Sophia had a positive relationship with her father's new wife? There had been other moments. Sophia referencing inside jokes I wasn't part of. Casual mentions of weekends spent at Thomas and Rebecca's lakefront home, a property far more impressive than our old family lake house. Rebecca helping Sophia choose her work wardrobe, the two of them shopping at boutiques I could no longer afford. Rebecca says this color brings out my eyes, Sophia had remarked once, modeling a new dress during a video call. Again, that twinge. Again, I'd pushed it aside. The worst part was that I had actively encouraged their relationship. "I'm glad you get along with Rebecca," I had told Sophia repeatedly. "It makes things easier for everyone." I had been so determined to be the bigger person, the mature ex-wife who didn't poison her daughter against her father's new marriage. Had that very maturity created the space for Rebecca to step into my role? My phone rang at 7:30 that evening. Sophia's name flashed on the screen. I answered with a carefully neutral, "Hello?" "Mom, I can explain," she began immediately, her voice tense. "Yesterday was complicated." "I'm listening," I said, trying to keep my tone even. Rebecca's birthday was a last-minute thing. Thomas called on Tuesday saying he wanted to surprise her, and everything came together quickly. "I didn't think you'd mind since we were planning to celebrate your birthday this weekend anyway." The casual dismissal of my feelings stung. "You could have told me the truth, Sophia. Instead, you lied about having to work." A pause. "I didn't want to hurt your feelings. And yet, here we are." I took a deep breath. What hurt most wasn't that you attended her celebration. It was seeing, "You call her mom in your comment. When did that start?" Another longer pause. "It's not what you think, it's just, it makes things easier sometimes, less awkward at family gatherings." "Family gatherings," I repeated, the words like ash in my mouth. "I see. Mom, please don't make this a bigger deal than it is. Rebecca and I have gotten close over the years. That's all. She's been really supportive of my career, introducing me to people in the industry. She's a friend." "Friends don't call each other mom," I pointed out. Sophia sighed heavily. "Look, it started as a joke a couple years ago. We were all at the lake house and I accidentally called her mom when asking her to pass the salt. Everyone laughed, including Thomas, and it just stuck. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't take away from our relationship." 2 years. My daughter had been calling another woman mom for 2 years and had never mentioned it to me. The casual revelation left me speechless. Sophia filled the silence, her words coming faster. "You'll always be my real mother. You know that, right? Rebecca is just... she's part of my life now, too. I didn't think it would upset you this much. You've always been so cool about everything with Dad and her." "There's a difference between being cool and watching my daughter give my title to the woman my husband left me for," I said quietly. "That's not fair," Sophia protested. "You're making it sound like I betrayed you. I'm just trying to have relationships with everyone in my family. Is that so wrong?" Family. There was that word again, the one that had once included me at its center, but now positioned me at its margins. "You lied to me," I said finally. "You told me you couldn't visit on my birthday because of work, but the truth is you chose to celebrate with them instead. That was a choice, Sophia." "It wasn't like that," she insisted. "The timing was just bad. Thomas had already made reservations at Le Jardin. They had a special chef coming in from New York. It was this whole thing. I was going to celebrate with you this weekend, I promise." "As an afterthought," I said. "After the real celebration with your real family." "Mom, stop. You're twisting everything." Her voice took on an edge of frustration. "I love you. You know I love you. But you can't expect me to choose sides forever. It's been 5 years since the divorce. Thomas and Rebecca are married. They're Part of my life, too. I never asked you to choose sides, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. I only asked for honesty and respect. I do respect you. So much. You're being unfair. Unfair. The word hung between us. Was I being unfair? Was it unreasonable to expect my daughter not to call another woman mom? Not to lie to me about why she couldn't visit on my birthday? I need some time, I said finally, to process all this. Mom, please don't be upset. Can we still do something this weekend? I'll come over, we'll have a nice dinner, maybe watch that documentary series you mentioned. The easiness of her suggestion, as if we could simply move past this revelation with a dinner and a documentary, felt almost insulting. I'm up for company this weekend, I replied. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk more. Mom, she began, but I had already ended the call. I sat in the gathering darkness of my cottage, phone clutched in my hand, and finally allowed myself to cry. The next morning, I woke with swollen eyes and a heaviness in my chest that made it difficult to breathe. My first instinct was to call Sophia, to try once more to make her understand how deeply she had hurt me. But what would be the point? Our conversation last night had made it clear that she saw the situation entirely differently than I did. In her mind, she was simply navigating complex family dynamics. In mine, she had betrayed the most fundamental relationship in both our lives. I made coffee and carried it out to my small patio, watching as the early morning mist rose from the grass. My neighbor Harriet waved from her garden, a concerned look on her face. Everything all right, Elaine? I thought your daughter was visiting yesterday. Change of plans, I called back, forcing a smile. I wasn't ready to share my humiliation with anyone, not even kind Harriet, who had brought me casseroles and companionship during the darkest days after Thomas left. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. I'm sorry about last night. Can we please talk in person? I can come over this afternoon? I stared at the message, uncertain how to respond. Part of me wanted to see her, to search her face for signs of the daughter I thought I knew. Another part feared what else I might discover. Before I could decide, another message arrived. This one included a photo, Sophia and Michael smiling in front of a sold sign. Wanted to share some good news. We bought a house. It's just 10 minutes from Dad and Rebecca. We close next month. The casual announcement hit me like a physical blow. 10 minutes from Thomas and Rebecca, an hour and a half from me. Another choice made, another sign of where her priorities truly lay. I set my phone down without responding and went back inside. The cottage suddenly felt not cozy but confining, filled with reminders of a relationship I had misunderstood. I grabbed my car keys, needing to be anywhere but here. I drove without destination, eventually finding myself on the road to our old neighborhood. I hadn't been back since moving out 5 years ago. Thomas and Rebecca had sold the house shortly after their wedding, upgrading to a larger property in an even more exclusive area. But the neighborhood still held memories of Sophia's childhood. The park where she learned to ride a bike, the ice cream shop where we celebrated the last day of school each year, the community pool where she'd been a summer lifeguard during high school. I parked near that pool, now closed for renovations according to a sign on the gate. Through the fence, I could see the empty concrete basin where Sophia had once performed an impromptu synchronized swimming routine for my birthday, making me laugh until my sides hurt. She'd been 14 then, still unself-consciously affectionate, still undeniably mine. When had that changed? Had the divorce created a fracture I hadn't recognized? Or had Rebecca simply offered something I couldn't, a connection to wealth and influence, a path to the life Sophia aspired to? My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Thomas's name appeared on the screen. In 5 years, he had called me exactly 7 times, always about practical matters related to the divorce. Why now? I answered cautiously. Hello? Elaine. His voice was immediately recognizable, deeper now than in his youth, but still with that slight hesitation before important statements. "I think we need to talk." "About what?" I asked, though I already knew. "Sophia called me this morning. She's upset. She says you're angry because she attended Rebecca's birthday." Of course she had called her father. Of course he was intervening. "That's between Sophia and me," I said. "Not when it affects the whole family," he replied. "Look, Elaine, I understand this is difficult, but Sophia is an adult. She's trying to maintain relationships with both her parents. Surely you can see that putting her in the middle isn't fair." The same word Sophia had used, unfair. As if I was the unreasonable one for feeling hurt. "I didn't put her in the middle, Thomas. She lied to me about why she couldn't visit on my birthday. She's been calling your wife Mom for 2 years without ever mentioning it to me. Those were her choices." A pause. "Rebecca mentioned she was uncomfortable about the mom thing at first. She told Sophia it wasn't necessary, but Sophia insisted. She sees Rebecca as a second mother figure. Is that really so terrible?" "A second mother," I repeated. "How generous of everyone to allow me to retain partial status." Thomas sighed, the sound achingly familiar from our final years together. "This isn't productive, Elaine. Sophia loves you. Everyone knows you're her mother. But Rebecca is part of her life too, and they've developed their own relationship. Isn't that healthier than animosity?" I gazed at the empty swimming pool, remembering Sophia's childhood laughter echoing off the water. "Did you call just to tell me I'm wrong to feel hurt?" "I called because our daughter is upset, and regardless of our past, I thought we could at least agree that her happiness matters." He paused. "Rebecca and I are hosting a housewarming dinner for Sophia and Michael next week. She wants you to be there." The invitation, delivered in Thomas's matter-of-fact tone, as if my attendance at an event in his and Rebecca's home was the most natural thing in the world, was the final straw. "No," I said simply. "Elaine, no, Thomas. I won't come to your home and pretend that everything is fine. I won't watch my daughter call another woman mom and act like it doesn't break my heart. I won't sit at a table with the people who seem to have forgotten that I exist, except when my feelings become inconvenient." "That's not fair," he began. But I cut him off. "Stop telling me what's fair. Was it fair when you left our 30-year marriage for your assistant? Was it fair when you started a new life that conveniently excluded me? Was it fair when our daughter began calling your wife Mom behind my back?" My voice had risen, and an older couple walking past my car turned to stare. I lowered my voice but couldn't contain the emotion behind my words. "For 5 years, I've done everything right. I never spoke ill of you to Sophia. I encouraged their relationship with Rebecca. I smiled and nodded when she talked about your wonderful new life. I stepped back so I wouldn't appear bitter or clingy. And what did that get me? A daughter who lies to me and calls another woman Mom. A birthday spent alone." Thomas was silent for a long moment. "I'm sorry you're hurting," he said finally, his voice softer. "That was never the intention. But Sophia is caught in the middle here, and she's trying her best to love everyone. Some forms of love feel a lot like betrayal," I said quietly. "Tell Sophia I need some time, and please don't call me again." I ended the call before he could respond, then turned off my phone entirely. I sat in my car for nearly an hour, watching families arrive for swim lessons at the adjacent indoor pool. Parents helping small children with swim caps and goggles. Teenagers slouching behind them, pretending indifference but secretly glad for the attention. The ordinary, precious moments of family life that I had once taken for granted. When I finally drove home, I felt oddly calm. Something had crystallized during those quiet moments in the car, a realization that no amount of explanation or justification would change what had happened. Sophia had made her choice, prioritizing her relationship with Thomas and Rebecca over her relationship with me. Perhaps not consciously, perhaps not maliciously, But the result was the same. The foundation we had built together, the trust I had believed unshakable, had crumbled beneath the weight of unspoken truths, and no amount of weekend visits or makeup, celebrations could rebuild it. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed a vase of flowers on my porch. The attached card read simply, "I love you, Mom. Please call me." I carried the flowers inside and placed them on the kitchen counter. Beautiful, expensive blooms arranged by a professional florist. Another gesture that meant less than the truth would have. In that moment, standing in my quiet kitchen with my daughter's peace offering before me, I made a decision. I would no longer organize my life around a relationship that existed more in my imagination than in reality. I would no longer measure my worth by my role as Sophia's mother. It was time to find out who Elaine could be on her own terms. For the next week, I moved through my days like a sleepwalker. I taught my literature classes at the community college, smiled at appropriate moments during faculty meetings, and exchanged pleasantries with neighbors. But inside, I felt hollowed out, as if something essential had been scooped from my chest. Sophia called daily. I let each call go to voicemail, listening to her increasingly worried messages but unable to formulate a response that wouldn't dissolve into tears or anger. "Mom, please call me back. I'm worried about you. Mom, I know you're upset, but we need to talk about this. Mom, Michael and I are still coming over on Saturday to take you to dinner for your birthday. I'll be there at 6 unless you tell me not to come." I finally texted her on Friday. "Not up for company this weekend. Need more time." Her response was immediate. "Mom, please don't shut me out. I love you." Those 3 words, "I love you," had once been the bedrock of my existence. Now they felt like a foreign language I was struggling to translate. What did love mean to Sophia? Was it compatible with the choices she had made? The lies she had told? I didn't know anymore. And that uncertainty was more painful than any conversation could be. On Saturday evening, the time when Sophia would have arrived for our belated celebration, I purposely left the cottage. I couldn't bear the thought of her showing up despite my message, couldn't face the wounded look I knew would be in her eyes. So I drove to a movie theater 2 towns over and sat through a forgettable romantic comedy, not registering a single plot point. When I returned home, a small gift bag hung from my doorknob with another note. "Didn't want to leave this in the rain. Love you, Mom." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a heart-shaped charm. Engraved on the back were the words, "Mother and daughter, an unbreakable bond." The irony was almost too much to bear. I placed the bracelet in my jewelry box without trying it on and went to bed, staring at the ceiling until dawn crept through my curtains. Sunday morning, I woke to the sound of my phone ringing yet again. This time it wasn't Sophia but her boyfriend Michael. "Elaine? I hope it's okay that I'm calling." "Sophia doesn't know." His voice was hesitant, concerned. I had always liked Michael. Thoughtful, kind, with a quiet intelligence that balanced Sophia's more impulsive nature. "It's fine, Michael. Is everything all right?" He sighed. "Not really. Sophia's been crying for days. She doesn't understand why you won't talk to her, and honestly, neither do I. I know she made a mistake with the birthday thing, but it seems like there's more going on." I closed my eyes, gathering my thoughts. "Has she told you everything? About calling Rebecca Mom? About lying to me?" "Yes," he said quietly. "She told me. She feels terrible about lying to you. She says she just didn't know how to tell you about Rebecca without hurting you. And yet, her solution hurt me far more than honesty would have. I know. She knows that now too." He paused. "Look, Elaine, I'm not calling to defend her. I'm calling because I'm worried about both of you. Sophia is devastated. She thinks she's lost you." Something in his phrasing caught my attention. "Lost me? I'm not the one who walked away, Michael. Isn't that what you're doing now, though? Walking away? The question hit harder than I expected. Was I walking away? Or was I finally acknowledging a distance that had been growing for years? I need time to process, I said finally, to figure out what our relationship means now. I understand, Michael replied, his voice gentle. Just don't take too long, okay? Family rifts have a way of hardening if they're left unaddressed. After we hung up, I sat on my porch swing, considering Michael's words. Family rifts. Was that what this was? Or was it something more fundamental? A recognition that the relationship I thought I had with my daughter had been, at least partly, an illusion. The week that followed brought more calls, more texts, more flowers. Thomas even emailed, the first personal, non-practical message he'd sent in 5 years. Elaine, I understand you're hurt, but this silence is devastating, Sophia. Whatever your feelings toward me and Rebecca, please don't punish our daughter for trying to navigate a difficult situation. She needs her mother. His words rankled. Punish our daughter. As if my pain was a weapon I was deliberately wielding rather than a wound I was struggling to heal. I drafted multiple responses, deleting each one. What could I say that would make any of them understand? That this wasn't about punishment, but self-preservation? That I couldn't simply resume our relationship as if nothing had changed? In the midst of this emotional turmoil, I received an unexpected call from the college dean. A professor at a prestigious university 2 hours away had taken sudden medical leave. They needed someone to teach Victorian literature for the remainder of the semester. My name had been recommended. It would mean commuting, of course, the dean said. But it's a foot in the door at a research institution. The kind of opportunity that doesn't come along often for community college instructors. 5 years ago, I would have declined immediately. The commute would have taken me away from Sophia, from our Sunday calls and monthly dinners. I would have prioritized our relationship over my career without a second thought. But now? Now the offer felt like a lifeline, a chance to immerse myself in work, to rebuild my identity around something other than motherhood. I'll do it, I said, surprising myself with the immediacy of my decision. Wonderful. They'll need you to start Monday. 3 days. 3 days to prepare for a sudden career advancement, a new commute, a different life. I spent the weekend in a flurry of activity, reviewing Victorian novels, planning potential lectures, researching affordable rentals near the university where I might stay a few nights each week to reduce driving. The practical tasks kept my mind occupied, preventing it from circling back to the still unanswered messages from Sophia. On Sunday night, exhausted but focused, I finally responded to her most recent text with a brief message. Taking on a teaching position at Westridge University starting tomorrow. We'll be very busy for the foreseeable future. We'll reach out when I can. Her response came within seconds. Mom, that's amazing. Congratulations. Can I call you to hear about it? I stared at my phone, feeling the familiar tug of our old patterns. It would be so easy to fall back into them, to call her, to share my excitement, to let her enthusiasm wash away the hurt between us. But nothing would be resolved. The fundamental breach of trust would remain unaddressed. Not a good time, I wrote back. Need to prepare for tomorrow. Okay, good luck, love you. That heart emoji. So casual, so insufficient to bridge the chasm between us. I didn't reply. The next morning, I drove to Westridge University with a strange sense of liberation. For the first time in decades, I was moving toward something that was solely mine. Not as Thomas's wife, not as Sophia's mother, but as Elaine Preston, literature professor. The nervous energy that filled me as I parked on campus felt almost like happiness. I was so absorbed in my new routine over the following weeks that I barely noticed the gradual spacing of Sophia's messages. Daily texts became every few days, then weekly. Her tone remained affectionate, but grew increasingly formal, as if she too was adjusting to our new, more distant relationship. I told myself this was healthy, a necessary boundary setting after years of enmeshment. But late at night, in the small apartment I'd rented near campus, I sometimes found myself staring at old photos on my phone, tracing Sophia's smile with my finger and wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. Westridge. University breathed new life into my teaching career. After years of introductory courses at the community college, I was finally engaging with students who shared my passion for literature. My Victorian literature seminar quickly became known for lively debates and innovative interpretations. For the first time since Thomas left, I felt intellectually alive. Dr. Graham Parker, the department chair, took an interest in my work. A distinguished scholar in his early 60s with kind eyes and a reputation for mentoring promising faculty, he began stopping by my office to discuss teaching strategies and research interests. "You have a unique perspective on Hardy," he remarked one afternoon as we discussed my lecture on Tess of the D'Urbervilles. "Have you ever considered writing about it?" I laughed self-consciously. My dissertation was on Hardy, but that was a lifetime ago. "Ideas don't expire, Elaine," he said simply. "Perhaps it's time to revisit them." That conversation planted a seed. During my evenings alone in the rented apartment, I began reviewing my old graduate school notes, rediscovering analytical threads I'd once found compelling. I started drafting an article connecting Hardy's female characters to contemporary feminist theory. The work absorbed me completely, providing a focus beyond my personal pain. Meanwhile, life at the cottage continued on weekends. I'd return to water plants, collect mail, and inevitably find traces of Sophia's attempts to reach me. Handwritten notes, small gifts, once a photo album of our travels together with the bye caption, "Remember who we are," on the cover. I stored these items in a drawer, unable to engage with them, but equally unable to throw them away. My neighbor Harriet kept me updated on local happenings and occasionally mentioned seeing Sophia. "Your daughter stopped by again yesterday," she said one Saturday as I pruned my rose bushes. "Such a lovely girl. She seemed worried about you." "I've been busy with the new teaching position," I replied, focusing intently on removing a diseased branch. Harriet gave me a long look. "Too busy for family?" The question stung, but I maintained my composure. "It's complicated, Harriet." "Always is," she said with the wisdom of her 80 years. "But complications don't resolve themselves with distance." I changed the subject, asking about her grandchildren's recent visit, but her words lingered. Complications don't resolve themselves with distance, yet distance was the only tool I had found to manage my pain. 3 months into my position at Westridge, Graham invited me to co-present with him at an upcoming conference in Boston. "Your work on gender dynamics in Hardy complements my research on Victorian social reform," he explained. "Together, we could offer a comprehensive analysis that neither of us could achieve alone." The invitation was professionally flattering and personally daunting. I hadn't traveled for academic purposes in years, hadn't seen myself as a scholar rather than just a teacher. "I'd be honored," I said, surprising myself with the confidence in my voice. As the conference approached, I threw myself into preparation, refining. My paper, creating presentation slides, even purchasing new professional clothing. The work provided a welcome distraction from the nagging awareness that Sophia's messages had become increasingly infrequent. Her weekly texts had dwindled to occasional check-ins, each more formal than the last. "Hope your classes are going well." "Michael and I closed on the house. Thought you'd want to know." No mention of visiting. No questions about seeing the new place. The unspoken understanding that our relationship had fundamentally changed hung between each carefully composed line. I responded with equal formality, congratulating her on the house and sharing brief updates about my classes. We were performing politeness, maintaining the barest connection while the true nature of our relationship remained unaddressed. The week before the Boston conference, I received an unexpected phone call from Thomas. "Elaine, I wouldn't bother you if it wasn't important," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "It's about Sophia." My heart stuttered. "Is she all right?" "Physically, yes, but she's struggling. Rebecca and I are concerned." He paused. "She and Michael broke up." The news caught me off guard. "What happened?" "I don't have all the details. She showed up at our house 2 nights ago, clearly upset. Said they'd been fighting for weeks about you, among other things. Apparently, Michael thought she should try harder to reconcile with you." A cold weight settled in my stomach. Had my actions affected her relationship with Michael? The thought that my distance might have contributed to her pain was unsettling. "Where is she now?" "She's staying with us temporarily. She's put the new house on the market. She can't afford the mortgage alone." Thomas cleared his throat. "Elaine, I know things have been difficult between you two, but she could really use her mother right now." The request was clear, reasonable even. My daughter was hurting. Shouldn't I set aside my own pain to comfort her? Yet something held me back. Not anger anymore, but a deeper understanding that rushing to Sophia's side would only reinforce our unhealthy patterns. I would sacrifice my needs for hers, and nothing would be resolved. "I'm leaving for a conference in Boston tomorrow," I said after a moment. "I can't cancel. I'm co-presenting. But please tell Sophia I'm thinking of her, and I'll reach out when I return." Thomas sighed. "She needs you now, not when it's convenient for your schedule." The criticism sparked a flash of anger. "My schedule isn't a hobby, Thomas. It's my career, the one I put on hold for decades to raise our daughter and support yours. I care deeply about Sophia, but I'm not dropping everything at a moment's notice anymore." "This isn't like you," he said, his tone simultaneously concerned and accusatory. "You've always put Sophia first." "Yes," I agreed quietly. "I have. And look where that got me." After we hung up, I sat in my office, staring at the carefully prepared presentation notes on my desk. Thomas was right. The old Elaine would have canceled the conference, would have rushed to Sophia's side regardless of the professional consequences. The old Elaine had structured her entire existence around being available whenever her daughter needed her. But that Elaine had been left alone on her birthday while her daughter celebrated with another mom. That Elaine had discovered that her unconditional love and support had not been enough to secure her place in her daughter's life. I picked up my phone and composed a text to Sophia. "Your father told me about you and Michael. I'm so sorry you're going through this difficult time. I'm leaving for a conference in Boston tomorrow, but would like to see you when I return next week. Please let me know if that would be all right." Her response came an hour later. "Thanks for reaching out. Good luck at your conference. Next week should be fine." The formal, distant tone broke my heart all over again. This was my daughter, the baby I had cradled through sleepless nights, the child whose skinned knees I had bandaged, the young woman whose college graduation had filled me with more pride than any achievement of my own. And now we were scheduling meetings like distant acquaintances. I went home that night and pulled out the drawer where I'd stored Sophia's notes and gifts. The silver bracelet with its unbreakable bond charm gleamed in the lamplight. I slipped it onto my wrist, running my finger over the engraved words. An unbreakable bond. Was that still true? Or had we both broken something precious through our actions and reactions? The next morning, I packed for Boston, placing the bracelet carefully in my jewelry case. Whatever had broken between Sophia and me, I wasn't ready to declare it irreparable. The conference would proceed as planned, but afterward, perhaps we could begin to rebuild, not the enmeshed relationship we'd had before, but something new. Something that honored both her independence and my self-worth. For the first time in months, I felt a small flicker of hope alongside the pain. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a willingness to try. The Boston conference exceeded my Expectations. My presentation with Graham was well received, generating thoughtful questions and an invitation to expand our paper for publication in a prestigious journal. Colleagues from universities across the country expressed interest in my work, exchanging contact information and discussing potential collaborations. For 3 days, I existed purely as a scholar, my personal struggles temporarily eclipsed by intellectual engagement. On the final evening, Graham invited me to dinner at an elegant restaurant overlooking the harbor. As we discussed the day's sessions over glasses of wine, he regarded me with curious eyes. "You've come alive these past few months," he observed. "When you first joined us, there was a guardedness about you. Now you're flourishing." I smiled, surprised by his perception. "I suppose I've rediscovered parts of myself I'd forgotten." "The academic world can be all-consuming," he agreed. "But in a good way, I think. It gives us purpose. Beyond the personal. Beyond the personal," I repeated softly. "Yes, that's exactly it." Graham hesitated, then leaned forward. "Forgive me if this is presumptuous, but I sense you've been through something difficult. Your focus seems almost deliberate, like someone swimming hard to escape a current." His insight startled me. We had kept our interactions strictly professional until now, focused on Victorian literature and academic politics. I hadn't mentioned Thomas or Sophia, hadn't shared the upheaval of the past months. "Is it that obvious?" I asked. He shook his head. "Only to someone who's been there. My wife left me after 28 years of marriage. For 2 years afterward, I buried myself in research, published 3 papers, and volunteered for every committee that would have me." His smile was rueful. Anything to avoid going home to an empty house. The simple acknowledgement of shared experience loosened something in my chest. Without intending to, I found myself telling Graham about Thomas, about Rebecca, about Sophia's betrayal and our estrangement. He listened without interrupting, his expression compassionate but not pitying. "So that's why I'm swimming so hard," I concluded, embarrassed by my unexpected candor. "I'm trying to build something that can't be taken away from me." Graham nodded, slowly. "I understand that impulse completely. But Elaine, your academic work isn't separate from who you are as a person, as a mother, as a woman who's experienced loss. Those parts of you inform your scholarship, give it depth and humanity. They also make me vulnerable," I pointed out. "Yes," he agreed, "but vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the courage to remain open to life despite knowing how much it can hurt." His words stayed with me during the flight home, weaving through my thoughts as I considered the conversation awaiting me with Sophia. Graham was right. I couldn't separate my scholarly self from my maternal self. Both were essential parts of my identity. The question was how to integrate them without sacrificing either. I texted Sophia after landing. "Back from Boston. Would you like to meet tomorrow?" Her response came quickly. "Yes. Coffee at Riverside Bakery at 10? Riverside Bakery was neutral. Territory. Not my cottage, not Thomas and Rebecca's house. A public place where we could talk without the weight of personal spaces pressing down on us. I agreed to the location, then spent a restless night rehearsing what I wanted to say. Sophia was already seated when I arrived, her hands wrapped around a mug, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail that made her look younger than her 29 years. She stood when she saw me, her movement hesitant, as if unsure whether to offer a hug or a handshake. We settled for an awkward half-embrace before sitting across from each other. "You look well," she said, studying me. "Different somehow." "Teaching at Westridge has been good for me," I replied. "How are you doing? Your father mentioned you and Michael." "Separated," she finished, her smile tight. "He's keeping the house. I'm staying with Dad and Rebecca until I figure out my next steps." The casual mention of Dad and Rebecca as a unit, a household where Sophia naturally belonged, still had the power to sting. But I focused on her pain rather than mine. "I'm sorry, Sophia. I know how much you cared for him." She shrugged, attempting nonchalance. "It was coming for a while. We wanted different things." She took a sip of her coffee. "He thought I was too dependent on Dad and Rebecca, said I needed to figure out who I was apart from them." A bitter laugh escaped her. "He started having these opinions right around the time you and I stopped talking." The implication was clear. Michael had sided with me in our estrangement, creating tension in their relationship. I felt a pang of guilt, quickly followed by irritation. Was Sophia suggesting that our problems had caused her breakup? "Relationships end for many reasons," I said carefully. "I doubt our situation was the only factor." "No, but it didn't help." She sighed. "Look, Mom, I know I hurt you. The birthday thing was thoughtless. I should have been honest about where I was going." It was the first direct acknowledgement of her deception, but even now she framed it as the birthday thing, minimizing what had been for me a profound betrayal. "Yes, you should have," I agreed. "But it wasn't just about one birthday, Sophia. It was discovering that you'd been calling Rebecca Mom for years without ever mentioning it to me. It was realizing that I'd become secondary in your life." Her eyes widened. "That's not true. You've never been secondary to me." "Actions speak, louder than words," I said gently. "When you chose to celebrate Rebecca's birthday instead of mine, when you lied about why you couldn't visit, when you called her Mom in public posts for everyone to see, what message do you think that sent?" Sophia's face flushed. "I wasn't trying to send a message. I was just living my life. Dad and Rebecca are part of that life. I care about them. Why is that so threatening to you?" "It's not about feeling threatened," I countered, though in truth, there was an element of that. "It's about respect, about honesty, about acknowledging that some choices cause pain, even if that's not the intention." So what was I supposed to do? Cut Dad out of my life because he hurt you? Refuse to have a relationship with Rebecca? Her voice rose slightly. "You always said you didn't want me to take sides." "I didn't. I don't. But there's a difference between maintaining relationships with everyone and elevating them above ours." Sophia shook her head, frustration evident. "This is exactly what Michael said. That I was so worried about pleasing Dad and Rebecca that I hurt you without even realizing it. But Mom, I wasn't trying to replace you. Rebecca isn't my mother. You are. The mom thing, it just happened. It made things easier at family gatherings." "Easier for whom?" I asked quietly. She had no immediate answer for that. We sat in silence. For a moment, the bakery bustling around us with morning customers. Finally, Sophia reached across the table, her hand palm up in invitation. "I miss you," she said simply. "These past months without you have been awful. I know things can't go back to how they were before, but I don't want to lose you." I looked at her outstretched hand, remembering all the times those fingers had reached for mine over the years. As a toddler crossing the street, as a child seeking comfort after a nightmare, as a bride walking down the aisle. Despite everything, she was still my daughter. And I still loved her, even through the hurt. I placed my hand in hers. "I don't want to lose you either," I admitted. "But we need to figure out what our relationship looks like now. I can't pretend the past months didn't happen." Relief washed over her face. "I know. We need to talk more, be more honest with each other. I should have told you about the mom thing with Rebecca from the beginning." "Yes," I agreed. "And I should have expressed my feelings instead of withdrawing completely. We weren't solving anything in that moment, just acknowledging the complexity of our situation. But it felt like a beginning. Tentative, fragile, but real." As we prepared to leave, Sophia noticed the bracelet on my wrist. the silver one with the unbreakable bond charm she'd left at my door months ago. "You're wearing it," she said, surprise and pleasure in her voice. I touched the charm lightly. "Some bonds bend but don't break," I said, "even when they're tested." She smiled, the first genuine smile of our meeting. "I'd like to believe that's true for us." "So would I replied. And I meant it, despite the uncertainty that still lingered between us. We parted with another awkward hug, promising to meet again soon. As I watched her walk to her car, I felt neither the sharp pain of recent months nor the uncomplicated love of earlier years. Instead, I experienced something new, a cautious hope tempered by newfound boundaries. Whatever relationship we rebuilt would be different from what we'd had before. It would have to account for all we'd learned about each other and about ourselves. It would be more honest, perhaps, more equal, and hopefully, in time, more genuine. The outward signs of reconciliation with Sophia were promising. We established a new routine, weekly lunches at a cafe midway between the university and Thomas's home, where she was still staying. Our conversations remained somewhat cautious, circling around safe topics like my teaching and her job search. We were relearning each other, testing the boundaries of our evolving relationship. But beneath this surface progress, I struggled with emotions I revealed to no one. At night, alone in my apartment near campus, doubts would creep in. Could I ever fully trust Sophia again? Would she revert to prioritizing Thomas and Rebecca once the initial intensity of our reconciliation faded? Was I setting myself up for another heartbreak? These questions haunted me, keeping me awake long after midnight. In the darkness, memories would surface. Sophia calling Rebecca Mom, Thomas defending their family unit as if I were an outsider. The birthday celebration I'd discovered through social media. The wounds were still raw, despite my efforts to move forward. I didn't share these doubts with Sophia. Our fragile reconnection seemed too delicate to burden with my lingering hurt. Instead, I maintained a carefully controlled demeanor during our meetings, warm but not effusive, engaged but not entirely open. At work, I channeled my unresolved emotions into productivity. The paper Graham and I had presented in Boston evolved into a full article, requiring extensive research and multiple drafts. I volunteered for committee work, mentored struggling students, and developed new course proposals. Colleagues remarked on my energy and commitment, unaware that my professional intensity was partly fueled by personal pain. Graham noticed, of course. His own experience with post-divorce immersion in work had sharpened his perception. "How are things with your daughter?" he asked one afternoon as we reviewed manuscript edits in his office. "Better," I replied automatically. "We're meeting regularly now." He studied me over his reading glasses. "That's good to hear. And how are you, really?" The simple question, asked with genuine concern, nearly undid me. How long had it been since someone had inquired about my well-being without an agenda? How long since I'd answered honestly? I began, then faltered. "I'm functioning." Graham set down his pen. "Functioning isn't the same as healing." "No," I agreed quietly. "It isn't." "Have you told her how deeply she hurt you?" I shook my head. What would be the point? It would only make her defensive. Besides, she knows. Does she? Or have you both agreed to pretend the wound isn't still bleeding? His directness was startling, but oddly comforting. In a world where everyone seemed to expect me to move on, to forgive and forget, Graham's acknowledgement of my ongoing pain felt like permission to be honest with myself. "I'm afraid," I admitted. Afraid that if I express the full extent of my hurt, I'll lose her again. Afraid that she'll choose them over me like she did before. "And so you protect yourself by holding back," he observed, "creating distance even as you try to reconnect. Is that so wrong? After what happened?" Graham considered this. "Self-protection isn't wrong, Elaine. But incomplete healing serves no one, not you, not your daughter. The question is whether you're willing to risk vulnerability again for the possibility of a more authentic relationship. I had no answer for him that day. The truth was, I didn't know if I was ready for that risk. The following weekend, I returned to my cottage after nearly 2 months of only brief visits to water plants and collect mail. The spring garden had exploded in my absence. Irises blooming, roses climbing, weeds flourishing between carefully planted beds. The house itself felt slightly stale, unlived in. I opened windows to let in fresh air and began the process of reconnecting with my primary home. As I was sorting through accumulated mail, a thick cream envelope caught my attention. Inside was an invitation to Thomas and Rebecca's 10th anniversary celebration, a garden party at their home, scheduled for the following month. I stared at the embossed card, my hands trembling slightly. Why would they invite me? We hadn't spoken since that tense phone call months ago when Thomas had called about Sophia's breakup. Our only connection was through our daughter, and even that relationship was still in repair. The answer came in a handwritten note on monogrammed stationery tucked behind the invitation. Elaine, I know this invitation may come as a surprise. Sophia suggested including you, and after much consideration, I agree it might be healing for everyone. You were an important part of Thomas's life for 30 years, and remain a fundamental part of Sophia's. Perhaps it's time to move beyond old grievances, Rebecca-old grievances, as if my pain were a petty complaint rather than a profound loss, as if Rebecca hadn't played a central role in the dismantling of my family. The condescending tone made my stomach clench. I set the invitation aside, unsure how to respond. Declining seemed appropriate. Why would I celebrate the marriage that had replaced my own? Yet refusing might create new tensions with Sophia, who clearly supported my inclusion. My phone rang, Sophia's name lighting up the screen. Of course she would call now. She probably knew the invitation had arrived. "Hi, Mom," she said when I answered, her voice carefully casual. "Are you back at the cottage this weekend?" "Just arrived," I replied. "I've been sorting through mail." A pause. "So you probably got Dad and Rebecca's invitation." "I did," I said neutrally. "I thought it would be nice if you came," she continued, words rushing together. "It's going to be a big event. Lots of people from Dad's firm, Rebecca's family, friends. You wouldn't have to interact with them much if you didn't want to." The fact that she assumed I wouldn't want to interact with Thomas and Rebecca showed more awareness than I'd given her credit for. Still, the suggestion that I attend their anniversary celebration struck me as tone-deaf. "Sophia," I said gently, "why would I want to celebrate the relationship that formed while my marriage was ending?" She sighed heavily. "I knew you'd see it that way. But Mom, it's been 5 years. Wouldn't it be healthier for everyone if we could all be in the same room occasionally? For my sake." There it was, the familiar appeal to sacrifice my comfort for her needs, the pattern we'd fallen into over decades, the expectation that my feelings would always take a back seat to hers. The old Elaine would have acquiesced, would have endured an evening of discomfort to please her daughter. But I wasn't that Elaine anymore. "I don't think I can do that," I said firmly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. And I need you to respect that boundary." Silence stretched between us. Then, surprisingly, Sophia said, "Okay, I understand." "You do?" I hadn't expected such easy acceptance. "Well, not completely," she admitted. "But Michael used to tell me I needed to be more sensitive about putting you in uncomfortable positions. I guess this is one of those times." The mention of Michael reminded me of their breakup, of the role our estrangement had played in their relationship troubles. A new thought occurred to me. "Sophia, did you suggest inviting me because you thought it would help your relationship with Michael? Is reconciliation with him part of this?" "What?" "No!" She sounded genuinely shocked. "Michael and I are done. This isn't about him. Then why push for something that you know would be painful for me? Another long pause. I guess I want to believe we can all be one big happy family somehow, that the past doesn't have to define us, that we can move forward together. The earnestness in her voice touched me, even as her naivety frustrated me. Some pasts can't be erased, Sophia. Some hurts don't disappear just because we wish they would. I'm trying to forge a new relationship with you, but asking me to celebrate Thomas and Rebecca's marriage is a step too far. I hear you, she said quietly. I'll tell them you can't make it. After we hung up, I sat with the invitation in my hands, feeling oddly victorious yet sad. For the first time, I had clearly articulated a boundary and Sophia had accepted it. This was progress. Halting, uncomfortable progress, but progress nonetheless. Yet the interaction highlighted how much remained unresolved between us. Sophia still didn't fully grasp the depth of my pain. She still harbored fantasies of merged family celebrations where past betrayals could be overlooked for the sake of harmony. And I still struggled to balance my love for her with my need for self-protection. Still wrestled with feelings of inadequacy when comparing myself to Rebecca, with her younger years and apparent ability to be both a career woman and a nurturing maternal figure to my daughter. The unseen struggles continued, even as outward reconciliation proceeded. The question was whether these hidden currents would eventually undermine our progress, or whether acknowledging them, first to myself, then perhaps to Sophia, might lead to more genuine healing. That night, I placed the invitation in my desk drawer rather than discarding it, not because I intended to accept, but because it represented a crossroads in my journey, a moment when I'd chosen self-respect over people-pleasing, authenticity over appearances, a small victory perhaps, but my own. Summer arrived with unexpected intensity, bringing heat that shimmered above the pavement and turned my cottage into a small oven despite the ceiling fans working overtime. I divided my time between campus, where I was teaching a summer seminar, and the cottage, where I tended to my increasingly dry garden in the early mornings before the temperature became unbearable. My relationship with Sophia had settled into a cautious routine. Our weekly lunches continued, supplemented by occasional text messages and phone calls. We were cordial, sometimes even warm, but the easy intimacy of our past remained elusive. Neither of us mentioned Thomas and Rebecca's anniversary party, which had come and gone according to the date on the invitation I'd stashed away. Then, one sweltering afternoon in late July, everything changed. I was in my office at Westridge, organizing materials for the fall semester when my phone rang. Unknown number. I nearly let it go to voicemail, probably a telemarketer, but answered at the last moment. Is this Elaine Preston? A woman's voice, professional but with an undercurrent of urgency. Yes, that's me. This is Nurse Watkins from Memorial Hospital. Your daughter Sophia has been admitted following a car accident. She's asked us to contact you. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. How badly is she hurt? She's stable but has sustained multiple injuries. The doctor can provide more details when you arrive. She recited the hospital address and department information with practiced efficiency. I thanked her, hung up and sat frozen for a moment, my mind racing through terrible possibilities. Then training kicked in, the emergency response instinct all mothers develop. I grabbed my purse, told the department secretary I had a family emergency, and drove to the hospital with my heart pounding against my ribs. The emergency department was chaotic. Crying children, worried families, harried staff moving purposefully through the maze of curtained areas. I identified myself at the desk and was directed to a treatment room near the back. Sophia lay on a hospital bed, her face pale against the white pillow. Her right arm was immobilized, her left leg elevated and wrapped in bandages. A cut across her forehead had been recently stitched, the skin around it already bruising. She looked so vulnerable, so young, Suddenly, not the adult who had hurt me, but the child I had protected for so many years. "Mom," she whispered when she saw me, tears immediately welling in her eyes. "You came." The simple statement broke something inside me. "Of course I came," I said, moving to her side and carefully taking her uninjured hand. "What happened?" Delivery truck ran a red light, hit the driver's side. Her voice was raspy, each word an effort. "They say I'm lucky. Could have been much worse. Could have been much worse." The words echoed in my mind, carrying the weight of all we might have lost today, all the conversations we hadn't yet had, the healing we hadn't completed, the relationship we hadn't fully rebuilt. A doctor entered, introducing himself as Dr. Chen. He explained Sophia's injuries: fractured radius in her right arm, deep laceration to her left calf that had required surgical repair, minor concussion, various contusions and abrasions. "She'll need considerable assistance during recovery," he concluded. "Is there someone who can stay with her?" Before I could respond, Sophia spoke up. "My dad and his wife are in Europe for their anniversary trip. Won't be back for another week." I hadn't known about their trip. Another detail of Sophia's life that hadn't been shared in our careful exchanges. But the information settled something inside me. "She'll stay with me," I said firmly. "I'll take care of her." Sophia's eyes widened slightly. "Mom, you don't have to." "Yes," I interrupted gently. "I do." The doctor nodded, satisfied, and outlined the care Sophia would need: pain management, wound care, physical therapy referrals, follow-up appointments. I listened attentively, mentally rearranging my life to accommodate these new responsibilities. My summer seminar had just 1 week remaining. I could request scheduling accommodations for fall preparations. When Dr. Chen left, Sophia regarded me with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. "Are you sure about this? It's a lot to ask, especially with everything." "You're my daughter," I said simply. "Some things transcend our difficulties." Her face crumpled, tears tracking down her pale cheeks. "I've been so awful to you." I stroked her hair back from her forehead, careful to avoid the stitches. "We've hurt each other," I acknowledged. "But none of that matters right now. All that matters is getting you well." The nurse arrived with discharge paperwork and instructions. After signing numerous forms, I helped Sophia into a wheelchair and out to my car, then drove carefully to the cottage. The small guest bedroom would need to be prepared. Fresh sheets, extra pillows for elevation, a bedside table for medications and water. As I helped her navigate the front steps with crutches, Sophia looked around with evident nostalgia. "I haven't been here in so long," she said softly. "Not properly." It was true. She'd dropped off gifts and notes during our estrangement, but hadn't actually entered the cottage in months. Now she would be living here indefinitely, dependent on me in a way she hadn't been since childhood. The irony wasn't lost on me. For years, I had structured my life around being available whenever Sophia needed me. Then, when her betrayal shattered that dynamic, I had deliberately created distance, establishing boundaries and rediscovering my independent identity. Now, circumstance had thrust us back into an intense caregiver-dependent relationship, but we were both different people than we had been before. The first days of Sophia's recovery established new patterns. Mornings were occupied with medication, simple breakfasts, and helping her bathe using a shower chair borrowed from a medical supply service. Afternoons often included doctor appointments or simply sitting together on the porch, reading or talking, quietly about inconsequential things. Evenings brought dinner, delivered by neighborly Harriet or prepared by me between Sophia's naps. Television, and finally, the complicated process of getting her comfortably settled for the night. We existed in a strange limbo, physically closer than we had been in months, yet still emotionally guarded. Neither of us mentioned the birthday betrayal, Rebecca, Thomas, or any of the issues that had driven us apart. Instead, we focused on the practical necessities of recovery, on rebuilding basic trust through reliable care and gratitude. A week into this arrangement, as I changed the dressing on Sophia's leg wound, she winced slightly. "Sorry," I murmured, trying to be more gentle. "It's okay," she said, watching me work. "You're good at this. You've always been good at taking care of people." "Years of practice," I replied with a small smile. Sophia didn't smile back. "That's the problem, isn't it? I've always let you take care of me, even as an adult. I've taken that for granted." The directness of her observation surprised me. "It's a mother's job," I said automatically. "No," she countered, her voice stronger than it had been since the accident. "It's a mother's job when her child is young." "But I'm 29, Mom. I should have been taking care of you, too. Instead, She trailed off, tears welling in her eyes. I finished securing the bandage, then sat on the edge of the bed, facing her. "Instead what, Sophia?" "Instead, I hurt you," she whispered. Deeply, deliberately even, though I didn't want to admit that to myself. The acknowledgement, so long awaited, so desperately needed, took my breath away. "Why?" I asked, the single word containing months of pain. Sophia looked down at her bandaged leg, then back to my face. "Because it was easier," she admitted. "Easier to slip into Dad and Rebecca's perfect life than to acknowledge the messiness of what he did to you. To us. Easier to pretend we were all one big happy family than to sit with the reality that he abandoned you for someone else." Her honesty created an opening for my own. "Do you know what hurt most?" I asked quietly. "It wasn't that you spent time with them. It wasn't even the birthday celebration, though that was painful. It was that you called her Mom. That you gave her the title I earned through 30 years of loving you without even telling me you were doing it." Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "I told myself it didn't mean anything, that it was just a word, just something that made gatherings less awkward. But that was a lie. I knew it would hurt you if you found out. I knew, and I did it anyway." The admission hung between us, raw and real and necessary. For the first time since discovering those damning social media photos, I felt the knot of pain in my chest begin to loosen, not because the hurt had disappeared, but because it had finally been acknowledged. "The accident made me realize something," Sophia continued, wiping at her tears. "If I had died in that car, my last interaction with you would have been that tense conversation about Dad's anniversary party. We would never have made things right." I took her hand, my own eyes filling. "But you didn't die. You're here. We have time." "Time to truly heal," she agreed. "Not just polite lunches and careful conversations, but real honesty, real forgiveness if you can ever get there." "I think," I said slowly, "that genuine acknowledgement of hurt is the first step toward genuine forgiveness." And for the first time in many months, I believed that might actually be possible. Sophia's recovery progressed steadily. By the third week, she could move around the cottage with crutches, manage basic self-care, and join me for short walks in the garden during cooler evening hours. Her increasing independence gave us both more space to process the emotional breakthrough we'd experienced. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch enjoying iced tea and the slight breeze that offered relief from the August heat, Sophia brought up the topic we'd been circling. "Mom, I've been thinking about what comes next. Dad and Rebecca get back from Europe tomorrow." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral despite the twist of anxiety in my stomach. Their return would inevitably complicate our situation. "They'll want me to come stay with them," she continued. "Rebecca called yesterday while you were at the store. They've already set up a bedroom for me on the main floor so I won't have to deal with stairs." "That makes sense," I said carefully. "Their house is larger and they'll have more hands for caretaking." Sophia set down her glass with deliberate precision. I told them no. You did? Yes. I said I was staying here with you. She met my eyes. Directly. But there's something I need to do first. Something I've been avoiding. I need to talk to them, to Dad especially, about everything that's happened between us. I need to be honest about how their actions and mine hurt you. My heart raced. Sophia, that's not necessary. This is between us. No, it's not. She interrupted firmly. That's the problem. We've all been acting like these are separate relationships that don't affect each other, but they do. Dad encouraged me to call Rebecca Mom. Rebecca went along with it. They both knew it would hurt you if you found out, but no one cared enough to consider that. The directness of her assessment startled me. In all our careful rebuilding, neither of us had so bluntly addressed Thomas and Rebecca's role in our estrangement. What exactly are you planning to do? I asked. I want us all to sit down together, she said. Here, in your space, on your terms. I want to clear the air completely. No more secrets, no more pretending. The prospect was simultaneously terrifying and compelling. To face Thomas and Rebecca directly, to have the hidden dynamics of our situation finally acknowledged, it was what I had secretly wanted and actively avoided for years. Are you sure that's wise? I hedged. Things are already complicated enough. Sophia reached across the small table between us to take my hand. Mom, you've spent 5 years being diplomatic, stepping back, making things easier for everyone but yourself. You've never confronted Dad about how his actions affected your relationship with me. You've never told Rebecca how it felt to hear about me calling her Mom. Don't you think it's time? Her perception cut through my defenses. She was right. I had swallowed my pain rather than expressing it, had retreated rather than confronted. In trying to be the bigger person, I had allowed others to minimize my feelings. What if it makes everything worse? I voiced my deepest fear. Or what if it finally clears the air? Sophia countered. Mom, when I was lying in that hospital bed, I realized life is too short for half-truths and eggshell walking. I don't want a superficial relationship with you anymore. I want something real, and that means dealing with the real issues. The determination in her voice reminded me of myself at her age, before compromise and accommodation had become my default mode. Something shifted inside me, a willingness to step into conflict rather than around it. Okay, I said finally. If you think this will help, I'm willing to try. Sophia called Thomas that evening, explaining her wishes in terms that left little room for argument. The meeting was set for the following Saturday afternoon. I spent the intervening days alternating between anxiety and a strange sense of liberation. After years of careful silence, I would finally speak my truth. When Saturday arrived, I prepared simple refreshments, iced tea, coffee, small sandwiches, more as a way to occupy my hands than from any genuine desire to play hostess. Sophia arranged the living room furniture to create a conversational grouping where no one would be physically elevated above others. Are you ready? She asked as the clock approached the appointed time. As I'll ever be, I replied, smoothing my shirt, nervously. The doorbell rang precisely at 2 o'clock. Thomas had always been punctual, a trait that had once seemed admirable, but now felt like another form of control, arriving exactly when expected, always the one who determined beginnings and endings. Sophia opened the door, greeting them with subdued warmth. I stood in the living room entryway, watching as Thomas and Rebecca stepped into my cottage for the first time. Thomas looked older than when I'd last seen him, more gray in his hair, deeper lines around his eyes. Rebecca was still beautiful, still significantly younger than both of us, but with a cautious expression that suggested she understood this wasn't a social call. Hello, Elaine, Thomas said formally. Thank you for hosting this discussion. Rebecca nodded, her smile tight. Yes, thank you. How lovely to see your home. The stilted pleasantries hung in the air, highlighting the absurdity of our situation. Former spouses and the new wife gathered in a room under the orchestration of their daughter. "Please, sit down," I said, gesturing to the arranged chairs. "Sophia feels we have important things to discuss." As they settled themselves, I caught Sophia's eye. She gave me a subtle nod of encouragement, a silent affirmation that after years of holding my peace for everyone else's comfort, it was finally time to speak my truth. The confrontation that had been 5 years in the making was about to begin, and uncomfortable silence settled over the living room as we all took our seats. Thomas sat stiffly at the edge of his chair, his posture reflecting the corporate authority he'd cultivated over decades. Rebecca perched beside him, her hand occasionally, brushing his arm in what seemed like a reflexive gesture of reassurance. Sophia, still limited by her injuries, had positioned herself slightly apart from both groups. Not quite with her father and Rebecca, not fully with me. "Thank you all for coming," Sophia began, her voice steadier than I had expected. "I know. This isn't easy, but after my accident, I realized some things need to be said." Thomas nodded, his expression carefully neutral. "We're just glad you're recovering well. Whatever you need to discuss, we're here to listen." "Actually," Sophia replied, "I'm not the one who needs to speak. Mom is." 3 pairs of eyes turned to me. I felt a momentary panic, a lifetime of accommodation urging me to soften what I was about to say, to prioritize harmony over honesty. But Sophia's encouraging gaze anchored me. "For 5 years," I began, my voice initially quiet but gaining strength. "With each word, I've watched from the sidelines as you constructed your new family. I've stayed silent when Sophia mentioned holidays at your home, celebrations I wasn't part of, traditions that replaced the ones we had built over 30 years. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "Elaine, no one was trying to exclude—" "Please," I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. "Let me finish." He fell silent, unaccustomed to being challenged by the woman who had once organized her entire existence around his comfort. "I accepted that our marriage was over," I continued. "I didn't fight the divorce or try to turn Sophia against you. I encouraged her to maintain her relationship with you both. I did everything right, everything mature and reasonable." I turned to look directly at Rebecca, who met my gaze with visible discomfort. And then I discovered that my daughter, the person I had rebuilt my life around after losing my husband, had started calling you Mom. Not occasionally, not accidentally, but regularly enough that it had become normal. So normal that no one thought to mention it to me. Rebecca's cheeks flushed. "I never asked her to." "But you allowed it," I said, not unkindly but firmly. "You both did. You created an environment where it felt natural to her, where my position in her life became secondary." Thomas straightened, his business negotiator's instinct for defense activating. "That's not fair, Elaine. We never intended to replace you. Sophia is an adult who makes her own choices about how she relates to people." "Yes, she is," I agreed. "But choices don't happen in a vacuum. They happen in the context of approval, encouragement, and subtle cues about what's acceptable." Sophia leaned forward, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at her healing leg. "She's right, Dad. You and Rebecca were pleased when I started calling her Mom. You said it made us feel like a real family. Those were your exact words." Thomas appeared genuinely startled by Sophia's intervention. In all our years of navigating post-divorce dynamics, she had never directly challenged his narrative. "I was trying to help everyone feel included," he said defensively. "To create harmony." "For everyone except me," I pointed out. "My exclusion was the foundation of your harmony." Rebecca finally spoke, her voice softer than I had expected. "I truly never wanted to take your place, Elaine. I know how important you are to Sophia. Then why accept a title that wasn't yours?" "To claim?" I asked, the question I had been holding back for so long finally finding voice. Why allow her to call you something that belongs to the woman who carried her, birthed her, raised her? The directness of my question seemed to catch Rebecca off guard. She glanced at Thomas, perhaps expecting him to answer for her as he often did in difficult situations. But this time, he remained silent. "I suppose," she said slowly. I was flattered. And selfishly, I enjoyed the feeling of finally having a child call me Mom. It was something I'd always wanted but never had. Her unexpected candor shifted something in the room's atmosphere. This wasn't the defensive posturing I had anticipated, but a genuine acknowledgement of her own vulnerability. "I understand wanting to be a mother," I said, my voice softening slightly. "But surely you can see how painful it was to discover this had been happening behind my back? To find out through social media, of all places?" Rebecca nodded, genuine regret crossing her features. "I never considered how you would find out." "That was thoughtless of me." Thomas cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Elaine, what exactly are you hoping to achieve here? The past is past. We can't change what's happened." "No, we can't," I agreed. "But we can acknowledge it. We can stop pretending that my feelings don't matter, that I should quietly accept whatever scraps of connection with my daughter are left after you've taken your portion." Sophia made a small sound of distress. "Mom, that's not—" "It's how it felt," I said gently. "When you lied about work to attend Rebecca's birthday instead of celebrating mine. When you started calling her Mom without ever discussing it with me. When you bought a house near them without considering how that would affect our relationship." The room fell silent as my words hung in the air. Thomas studied his hands, Rebecca looked out the window, and Sophia's eyes filled with tears. No one rushed to deny what I had said, a small victory in itself. "I'm not asking for apologies or promises," I continued. "I'm simply reclaiming my right to name what happened and how it affected me. For too long, I've buried my pain to make everyone else comfortable. I won't do that anymore." Thomas finally looked up, meeting my eyes directly. For a brief moment, I glimpsed something that might have been respect in his expression. "You've changed," he observed quietly. "Yes," I agreed. "I have." And in that moment, I realized the most important truth of all. My power had never been in controlling others' actions or securing their loyalty. It had always been in my ability to stand firmly in my own truth, regardless of their response. For the first time since Thomas had left, I felt truly, completely free. The atmosphere in the room shifted following my declaration. Something unspoken had changed, not just in how they saw me, but in how I experienced myself. The cottage suddenly felt more like my territory, less like a neutral meeting ground where I was simply one participant among many. Rebecca was the first to break the silence. "I think we owe you an apology, Elaine. I certainly do." She glanced at Thomas, who remained stoically silent. "Whatever our intentions, we didn't consider how our actions were affecting you." "Thank you," I said simply. The acknowledgement meant more than I had expected, though it didn't erase the years of hurt. Thomas cleared his throat. "This is all very emotional. But what practical changes are you suggesting? Sophia is an adult. She makes her own choices about her relationships." His retreat to practicality was so characteristically Thomas that I nearly smiled. He had always been uncomfortable with emotional confrontation, preferring to redirect toward concrete solutions. "I'm not suggesting any practical changes," I replied calmly. "I'm not asking Sophia to stop seeing you or to move closer to me or to change what she calls either of you. I'm simply stating my truth after years of silence. What happens next is up to each of us individually." Sophia shifted forward in her seat. "I have some thoughts about that." She looked around at each of us before continuing. "The accident made me realize I've been trying to please everyone while actually pleasing no one. I've been dishonest with all of you in different ways, She turned to face Thomas and Rebecca. With you two, I pretended everything was perfect. I never told you how much Mom was hurting, or how guilty I felt about dividing my time. I acted like we were this ideal blended family because that's what you seem to want. Rebecca frowned slightly. We never asked you to pretend. Not directly, Sophia acknowledged. But there was always this unspoken expectation that we'd all moved on, that the past was behind us. You didn't want to hear about Mom's struggles, or my complicated feelings. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. We were trying to create a positive environment by ignoring reality, Sophia finished for him. And Dad, you never once acknowledged how your choices hurt Mom and me. You just expected us to adapt to your new life. I watched in astonishment as my daughter articulated truths I had never dared express. The accident had changed her, or perhaps it had simply given her permission to speak with the directness she had always possessed, but rarely displayed. Sophia then turned to me. And with you, Mom, I downplayed my relationship with them because I knew it hurt you. I created these separate worlds and tried to exist in both without ever being fully honest in either one. That's on me, not on any of you. Her willingness to take responsibility moved me deeply. This wasn't the defensive young woman who had accused me of being unreasonable just months ago. What do you want now, Sophia? I asked gently. She took a deep breath. I want authenticity. From all of us. No more pretending. No more separate realities. She looked at Rebecca. That means I can't call you Mom anymore. It was never fair to my mother, and honestly, it wasn't even authentic to our relationship. You're important to me, but in a different way. Rebecca nodded, her expression a mixture of hurt and understanding. I respect that. And Dad, Sophia continued, I need you to acknowledge what your choices cost us, not to undo them or feel guilty forever, but just to recognize reality. Thomas's jaw tightened. This was clearly uncomfortable territory for him. Sophia, I've always tried to do what's best for everyone. No, she interrupted gently. You did what was best for you, and that's your right. But don't rewrite history to make yourself the hero of a story where other people got hurt. The directness of her statement hung in the air. Thomas looked momentarily lost, perhaps seeing for the first time that his carefully constructed narrative wasn't universally accepted. I never meant to hurt anyone, he said finally, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. Intentions aren't outcomes, Sophia replied, with a wisdom that made my heart swell with pride despite the difficult moment. The outcome was pain, whether you meant it or not. I watched this exchange with a strange sense of detachment. For years, I had wanted Thomas to acknowledge the hurt he had caused, had fantasized about confrontations where he finally understood the impact of his actions. But now that it was happening, I realized something unexpected. His acknowledgement, while validating, wasn't essential to my healing anymore. The freedom I had claimed wasn't dependent on his recognition or remorse. It existed independently, rooted in my own reclamation of truth rather than in his response to it. I think, I said carefully, that we've all been trapped in roles that no longer serve us. I've been the wronged ex-wife, Sophia's been the dutiful daughter trying to please everyone, Thomas has been the provider moving on to a new chapter, and Rebecca's been the second wife seeking legitimacy. I looked around at their attentive faces. Maybe it's time we all stepped out of those roles and just became people, complex, flawed, capable of both hurting and healing each other. A silence followed my words, not uncomfortable this time, but contemplative. The tension that had filled the room began to dissipate, replaced by something that felt almost like possibility. I'd like that, Rebecca said quietly. Thomas nodded slowly, perhaps not fully convinced, but at least willing to consider a new perspective. Sophia's eyes shone with unshed tears. Thank you, she said, looking directly at me, for having the courage to start this conversation. As we sat together in the fading afternoon light, The weight I had carried for 5 years, the resentment, the hurt, the sense of displacement, began to lift. Not completely, not all at once, but enough to feel the difference. In naming my pain without apology, in refusing to minimize it for others' comfort, I had finally granted myself the emotional freedom I had been denying for so long. Whatever happened next, I would face it as my authentic self. Not as Thomas's ex-wife or even primarily as Sophia's mother, but as Elaine Preston, a woman reclaiming her right to her own experience. 2 weeks after our confrontation, life had settled into new patterns. Sophia continued her recovery at my cottage, though she now divided her time more evenly, some days with me, others with Thomas and Rebecca, who had adjusted their work schedules to assist with her care. The difference now was transparency. There were no more hidden visits, no separate family narratives, no pretense that our lives didn't intersect. I returned to campus for fall semester preparations, confident that Sophia could manage a few hours alone or with the help of kind Harriet. Next door. My paper with Graham had been accepted for publication, and the department had approved my proposal for a new seminar on female Victorian writers beyond the Brontes and Eliot. One unusually cool evening, as Sophia and I shared dinner on the porch, she mentioned seeing Michael. He came to Dad's house to drop off some of my things, she explained, pushing food around her plate. It was awkward. I imagine it would be, I replied. How did you feel seeing him? She considered this. Sad, but not devastated like before. Mostly I realized we really weren't right for each other. Because of the disagreements about me, I asked cautiously. Partly, but also because he wanted me to be someone I wasn't ready to be yet. She set down her fork. He wanted an independent partner with clear boundaries, someone who knew exactly who she was apart from her family. And I was still trying to please everyone, still defining myself through others' expectations. Her self-awareness impressed me. And now, a small smile played at her lips. Now I'm learning. The accident, our estrangement, even the breakup, they forced me to figure out who I am when everything else falls away. The parallels to my own journey weren't lost on me. We had both been catalyzed by loss, pushed toward authenticity by circumstances rather than choice. Mom, Sophia said suddenly, did you know Dad's firm is struggling? The Harrison project fell through, and they lost their biggest client last month. This was surprising news. Thomas's architectural firm had been consistently successful for decades. No, I hadn't heard. Rebecca mentioned it when she was helping me with physical therapy yesterday. Apparently, they're downsizing their house, moving to something smaller outside the city. I absorbed this information without the satisfaction I might once have felt. Thomas's professional setbacks didn't undo my pain or vindicate my position. They were simply part of life's natural ebb and flow, the universal balance that eventually touches everyone. That must be difficult for them, I said sincerely. Sophia studied me with curious eyes. You really don't care anymore, do you? About Dad's success or failure? I care as your father, I clarified. I want him to be well because he matters to you, but his circumstances no longer define my worth or happiness. She nodded slowly. That's what freedom looks like, isn't it? When someone else's life stops determining your own? Yes, I agreed. I think it is. As the evening deepened around us, fireflies began to appear in the garden, tiny points of light emerging from the growing darkness. They reminded me of something Graham had said months ago about vulnerability, that it wasn't weakness, but the courage to remain open to life despite knowing how much it could hurt. Looking at my daughter, wounded but healing, humbled but stronger, I realized we had both found that courage. Not through dramatic gestures or perfect resolutions, but through the quiet, persistent work of facing truth and choosing authenticity, even when it hurt. Some wounds would never completely heal. Some losses would always ache. But we were no longer defined by them. And in that realization was its own kind of balance, its own form of justice. September brought crisp air, turning leaves, and significant changes. Sophia's physical recovery had progressed to the point where she needed only occasional physical therapy sessions. She had found a small apartment midway between my cottage and Westridge University, where she'd surprisingly applied for and received an administrative position in the Alumni Relations Office. "Are you sure about this?" I had asked when she first mentioned the job opportunity. "It's quite different from your marketing career." "That's partly why I want it," she had explained. "Marketing was Dad's suggestion, never really my passion. I want to try something new, something I choose for myself." Her decision to work near me rather than near Thomas and Rebecca wasn't lost on me, though I was careful not to assign too much meaning to it. This wasn't about choosing sides anymore, but about Sophia finding her own path. On a golden Saturday afternoon, as I was grading papers in my favorite campus cafe, a familiar figure appeared at my table. "Do you mind if I join you?" Thomas asked, his voice lacking its usual confidence. I gestured to the empty chair across from me, curious about this unexpected visit. He had never sought me out independently since our divorce. Thomas set down his coffee and sat, looking uncomfortable but determined. "I've been thinking about our conversation at your house," he began. "About what Sophia said." I waited, giving him space to continue without prompting. "She was right," he admitted, the words seeming to cost him something. "I never acknowledged how my choices affected you both. I told myself a story where everyone would be fine, where my happiness didn't come at anyone else's expense." He met my eyes directly. "That wasn't true, and I'm sorry." The apology I had once desperately craved now arrived when I no longer needed it for my healing. Still, it meant something. Not because it changed the past, but because it confirmed that growth was possible for all of us. "Thank you for saying that," I replied simply. He nodded, then hesitated before continuing. "There's something else. Rebecca and I are moving to Denver next month. My firm is opening a smaller satellite office there after the downsizing here. Sophia mentioned you were having business challenges. I'm sorry to hear that." Thomas looked surprised by my genuine concern. "Thank you. It's been humbling, but perhaps necessary." He paused. "The thing is, we're worried about Sophia, about leaving her when she's still recovering, still finding her footing." I understood his concern. For all our complicated history, Thomas did love our daughter. "She's stronger than you might think," I assured him. "And she's building her own life now, making her own choices." "Like her mother," Thomas observed with unexpected insight. The comparison startled me, but I recognized its truth. Sophia was, indeed, following a path similar to mine, rebuilding after loss, reclaiming her identity, choosing authenticity over accommodation. "I wanted to ask," Thomas continued, "if you would keep an eye on her after we leave. Not in a hovering way, just be there if she needs someone." The request might once have felt like an obligation, another expectation placed on me as the more reliable parent. Now it simply felt like an acknowledgement of the strength of my relationship with our daughter. "Of course," I said. "But Sophia doesn't need watching over anymore. She needs respect for the woman she's becoming." Thomas nodded. Slowly. "You've both changed so much. Somehow I stayed the same." "It's never too late to grow," I offered, surprising myself with the generosity I now felt toward the man who had once broken my heart. As Thomas prepared to leave, he extended his hand across the table, a formal gesture that nonetheless carried meaning. "Thank you, Elaine, for everything." I took his hand briefly, feeling neither the old love nor the bitter resentment that had once defined our relationship. Instead, I felt something new, the quiet dignity of two people acknowledging a shared past without being imprisoned by it. The circle that had begun with betrayal was completing itself, not with a perfect resolution, but with something more authentic. Mutual recognition of harm done and growth achieved, of separate paths now being traveled with greater awareness. As I watched Thomas walk away, I realized that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or condoning, but about releasing the power of the past to determine my present. In that moment of clarity, I understood that I had finally, truly moved on. On my 66th birthday, exactly 1 year after the discovery that had shattered my world, I woke to sunlight streaming through my cottage windows and the scent of coffee brewing. Sophia had insisted on staying overnight to start the celebrations early, though the real celebration wouldn't happen until evening, when Graham and several colleagues would join us for dinner. I found her in the kitchen, arranging fresh-cut flowers in a vase while pastries warmed in the oven. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said, embracing me with genuine warmth. We carried our breakfast to the porch, where the autumn garden blazed with late-season color. The morning air held that particular crispness that signals summer's definitive end and winter's approach, a melancholy beauty I had always loved. "I have something for you," Sophia said, handing me a small wrapped package. "I wanted you to have it first thing." Inside was a journal bound in soft leather, its pages thick and creamy. On the first page, Sophia had written, "For the stories you haven't told yet, the world needs your voice." "It's beautiful," I said, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Graham mentioned you're thinking about writing a memoir," she explained. "About finding yourself again after divorce, about rebuilding your identity. He said your students would benefit from hearing a journey like yours." I hadn't shared those tentative plans with Sophia, still protective of my newly reclaimed ambitions. "It's just an idea," I said. "I'm not sure I have anything worthwhile to say." "You do," she insisted. "More than you realize." We sat in comfortable silence, watching a cardinal flit between garden branches. So much had changed in a year. Thomas and Rebecca now settled in Denver, Sophia thriving in her new position, my own career flourishing with unexpected opportunities. The cottage felt fully mine now, no longer a downsized compromise but a chosen space that reflected my authentic self. "You know what I realized recently?" Sophia said, breaking our contemplation. "All those years, I thought the worst thing that could happen was conflict. People getting angry, relationships changing. I was so afraid of rocking the boat that I created something much worse. Disconnection." I nodded, recognizing the wisdom in her observation. We can survive conflict. We might even grow from it. But disconnection, living behind walls of politeness and pretense, that slowly suffocates the soul. "How did you get so smart?" she asked, a teasing smile playing at her lips. "Pain is an excellent teacher," I replied. "If you're willing to learn from it." The simple truth hung between us, acknowledged without bitterness. We had both been wounded, had both made mistakes, had both found our way to something more genuine through the very difficulties we had once tried to avoid. As the morning light strengthened around us, illuminating the garden's vibrant colors, I realized that this moment of quiet connection, of shared understanding, was the real gift. Not just survival, but transformation. Not just reconciliation, but wisdom earned through the courage to face hard truths. I opened the new journal, running my fingers over its blank pages. Perhaps I did have a story worth telling after all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.